I always imagined my honeymoon would be a soft blur of sunlight and slow mornings. The kind of trip where time stretches and everything smells like sunscreen and peace. Where you forget what day it is, and the only thing you argue about is whether to have dessert twice. But what I got was a cold slap of betrayal. And the worst part? It started before the plane even left the ground. My name is Julia, and I married my best friend, or at least, I thought I did. Ethan and I had been together for nearly 5 years. Through job changes, hospital visits, funerals, and family chaos, we stuck together. He was calm, reliable, and made me feel like I had finally found a safe place to land. Our wedding wasn't huge, but it was beautiful, intimate. Candlelight, string quartet, vows we wrote ourselves. I remember crying as he promised, "It'll always be just you and me." Funny, right? Because it turned out, just you and me included someone else. Her name was Lila. I met her once, briefly. She was Ethan's second cousin, or maybe third. I could never keep track. All I knew was she lived a few states away and had recently gone through a nasty breakup. At the reception, Ethan mentioned that she seemed really down and that he might check in on her later. I didn't think much of it. I was floating, high on love and champagne, surrounded by friends and dancing in the future. We left for our honeymoon the next day. A beachfront resort in Maui, our dream destination. I'd been planning it for months. I packed books I hadn't had time to read in years. Swimsuits. A playlist of songs that made me think of him. I was ready to begin our forever. When we landed, Ethan seemed off. Tense. Checking his phone more than usual. I chalked it up to wedding exhaustion. I didn't press. But at the hotel check-in, something strange happened. The woman at the front desk smiled at us and said, "You're the Thompson party of 3, right?" I blinked. "Sorry, 3. Ethan laughed a little too quickly. "Oh, yeah, my cousin Lila's joining us for a few days. I figured she could use the fresh air. She's had a rough time, you know?" It was said so casually, like he'd just told me he ordered an extra coffee. I stared at him, trying to piece together the words. My chest tightened. My brain felt like it was glitching. "She's joining us on our honeymoon?" I repeated, voice flat. He shrugged. "Not the whole time. Just the first week." I felt the ground disappear under me. A week? Of the 2-week honeymoon I dreamed about for years? He had invited another woman without even asking me? And not just any woman. A cousin I barely knew. Someone who hadn't RSVP'd to the wedding, who hadn't even sent a gift, who I hadn't spoken to in more than 5 minutes in my life. He didn't see the problem. "I thought you'd understand," he said. "You're always the compassionate one. She's fragile right now. Alone. You'd want someone to do the same for you if you were in her shoes." I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I nodded, and smiled, and walked with him to the room. Because that's what years of being the cool girl teaches you to do. Don't overreact. Don't make a scene. Be flexible. Be kind. Be the bigger person. Even when the man you just married, invites someone else into your sacred space without even the courtesy of a conversation. I couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the jet lag, but because I was already starting to feel it, the bitter aftertaste of a promise breaking apart in my hands. And that was only day 1. The next morning, I woke up before Ethan. I lay there in the half-light, staring at the ceiling fan above the hotel bed, listening to the waves crashing distantly outside our window. And for a brief, foolish moment, I told myself maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe Lila would be a quiet presence, maybe she'd do her own thing, and Ethan and I would still get our time, just the two of us. That hope shattered the second I walked into the breakfast area. Lila was already there, wearing one of my beach cover-ups. She must have gone through my luggage while we were sleeping. She was lounging like she owned the place, sunglasses perched on her head, mimosa in hand, chatting up the waiter and laughing just a little too loudly. When she saw me, she didn't even flinch. "Oh my God, Jules. You're finally awake," she squealed, like we were lifelong best friends. "Ethan said you sleep like a log after flights. I already ordered you that fruit thing you like. What's it called? That acai whatever." I stared at her. I hadn't seen her in over a year. She had no idea what I liked. And Ethan? He was nowhere to be seen. I sat down slowly, still trying to process why this stranger, because that's what she really was, felt so comfortable in the middle of our honeymoon. She chatted nonstop. About her ex. About how hard the breakup was. About how she needed a total spiritual reset and was so grateful we were open-hearted enough to include her in this soul-healing journey. My eye twitched. Open-hearted? Include her? She hadn't been invited. She'd inserted herself, and Ethan had handed her a golden key. And speaking of Ethan, he strolled in 15 minutes later with 2 coffees and a croissant for her. "Morning, ladies," he said, smiling at us like this was normal. I watched them. They weren't flirting. Not openly. But they were comfortable. Too comfortable. She touched his arm when she laughed. He poured her orange juice without asking. She knew the passcode to his phone. He wiped something off her cheek like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I sat there like a third wheel on my own honeymoon. By lunchtime, I realized she had absolutely no intention of giving us any space. Every time Ethan suggested something romantic, like the couple's massage I had booked 6 months in advance, Lila found a way to wedge herself in. "Oh, that spa has a great 3-person mud wrap. Let's all go." Or worse. "I don't want to be left alone. It's so hard for me right now, emotionally." And Ethan, my sweet, oblivious husband, he kept reassuring her. Kept saying things like, "We'll make it fun," or "Your family. We're happy to have you here." But he never once asked how I felt about it. Never once looked at me long enough to see the fury building behind my polite smile. That evening, I sat on the balcony, glass of wine in hand, while they played cards inside the room. Our room. I watched the moon reflect off the ocean and thought, this is not how it's supposed to feel. This is not what I signed up for. And as Lila's laugh echoed from behind the sliding doors, followed by Ethan's, I realized something that chilled me to my core. She didn't act like she was crashing our honeymoon. She acted like she was sharing it. On the 3rd night, I woke up to the sound of whispering. Not the kind of whispering that happens in dreams. Real. Human. Too close. I reached out across the bed, expecting to find Ethan beside me, but his side was empty. Still warm, but empty. I sat up and listened again. The voices were muffled, low, coming from the living room area of our honeymoon suite. I pulled on a robe and crept toward the door. I didn't make a sound. Through the gap, I saw Ethan and Lila sitting together on the pull-out couch. She was curled up in a blanket, feet tucked under her, and Ethan was beside her, shoulders hunched forward like he was confessing something. I couldn't hear the words, but the body language said enough. Close. Intimate. Familiar. He reached over and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I stepped back. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't barge in. I didn't scream. I just stood there, heart pounding, ears ringing, every fiber in me wanting to believe I was misreading it. The next morning, I confronted Ethan. "What were you two talking about last night?" I asked as he brushed his teeth. He looked startled. "You heard us." "I heard something. I saw you sitting with her." "Close." He shrugged. "She had a nightmare. Woke up crying. I was trying to calm her down. And that required tucking her hair behind her ear?" He paused. It was only a second, but it was long enough to confirm everything I feared. "I was comforting her, Julia. She's going through hell. You're making this into something it's not. No apology. No recognition that I might feel violated. That our honeymoon was being overtaken by a third person who suddenly had access to his emotions, his attention, his nights." That afternoon, I returned from the beach early. I'd gone alone because Lila didn't feel like sun, and Ethan had a headache. When I walked into the suite, I froze. Lila was in my silk pajama top, the one Ethan had gifted me on our anniversary. She was lounging on the bed, our bed, scrolling through her phone. When she saw me, she didn't even flinch. "Oh hey, I hope it's okay. I spilled something on my shirt earlier." Ethan said I could borrow something. I didn't respond. I just stared at her. She wasn't embarrassed. She wasn't sheepish. She looked smug, like she knew she was getting under my skin and was enjoying every second of it. That night, I told Ethan I wanted her gone. "She's not well," he said. "I can't just kick her out." "She's not your responsibility," I replied. His face hardened. "She's family. She has no one, Julia. I'm not going to abandon her." "And what about me?" I asked. "Your wife?" "On our honeymoon?" He didn't answer. Just walked out onto the balcony. I stared at the door long after he closed it. And in that moment, I realized something horrifying. I wasn't his priority anymore. He had brought another woman into our sacred space without my consent. And now he was choosing her comfort over my boundaries, over my dignity, over our marriage. I booked my flight while sitting in the hotel bathroom, floor cold beneath me, heart pounding like a war drum. The reservation page blurred as I stared at it, trying to breathe through a storm of disbelief and humiliation. I wasn't supposed to be doing this. I wasn't supposed to be alone, rebooking flights during what should have been the most romantic trip of my life. But here I was, curled up in a damp towel, credit card in hand, planning my escape from my own honeymoon. The last straw had come that morning. I'd returned from a long walk on the beach, trying to clear my head, remind myself who I was before this madness began, only to find Lila wearing Ethan's hoodie, the one I always stole because it still smelled like him after laundry day, the one I wore on our road trips and during winter movie nights. And she was curled up in it, laughing at something on his phone, sitting on his lap like it was the most natural place in the world. I didn't even speak. I just walked past them, into the bedroom, locked the door, and started packing. When Ethan finally knocked, I opened it just wide enough to see his face. "I'm going home early," I said, voice flat. He blinked. "You're overreacting." "No," I said calmly. "You're underreacting. There's a difference." He tried to guilt me. Said Lila would be devastated if I left. That it would create tension in the family. That we could still salvage the second half of the trip if I gave her some space. Some space. I snapped. "I need space. This was supposed to be ours, not hers." He didn't stop me. He didn't chase me. He just watched as I wheeled my suitcase out of the suite, past the concierge desk, past the honeymooners kissing by the elevator. It took me 11 hours to get home. The silence in our apartment felt like a slap. The couch was still draped with the wedding shawl I'd forgotten to pack. My bouquet, now dried and drooping, stood in a vase on the counter. I dropped my bag, cried harder than I'd cried in years, slept in the guest room. The next day, I went to work. I didn't know what else to do. I needed something normal, something mine. That night, I called Ethan. He didn't answer. The next day, I tried again. No reply. By day 3, I started to panic. I reached out to one of his friends, someone who had been at the wedding. "Hey, have you heard from Ethan?" His reply came instantly. "Didn't he come back already? I thought he flew in yesterday. Lila posted a story from your apartment." My stomach turned to ice. I opened Instagram. There she was, Lila, wrapped in my bathrobe, drinking coffee out of our engagement gift mug, feet up on our couch. Caption: "Finally home." Home? Our home? My hand shook as I texted Ethan. "Is she in our apartment?" This time, he answered. "Just for a few days. She's still feeling really fragile." I didn't want her to be alone. I stared at the message for a long time. Then I packed another bag and checked into a hotel, because I wasn't going to sleep in the same bed where another woman had just called herself at home. Not when that bed still had wedding glitter in the sheets. Not when I was still legally married to the man who let her in. The 5th night I spent in the hotel was the night something inside me finally broke. I hadn't eaten in nearly 2 days. I'd barely slept. My phone had gone quiet. No missed calls, no voicemails from Ethan, no attempt to find me. Just silence, as if I had evaporated. But Lila's Instagram wasn't silent. She posted every day. Little moments from my life, sunset shots from our balcony, morning walks through my neighborhood, coffee at my favorite corner cafe. Always tagged with some passive-aggressive quote like, "Grateful for people who show up when you need them most. Healing where I'm loved." Sometimes the safest places are the ones you least expect. She was building a narrative, one where she was the victim, the broken bird, the misunderstood cousin, the one my husband had saved. And I was the invisible villain, the unfeeling wife, the woman who abandoned her marriage because she couldn't share a little space. But everything unraveled the moment I called my sister. I didn't want to say anything, she confessed over the phone. But Lila's been weird about Ethan for years. At Christmas last year, she got drunk and called him the one that got away. I thought she was just joking. My throat closed. "You're telling me she's had feelings for him all this time?" "I think so," my sister said gently. And honestly, I don't think she was ever subtle about it. I couldn't sit still. I called Ethan again. This time, he picked up. He sounded tired. Not angry. Not sorry. Just exhausted. "Why is she in our apartment?" I asked. "She didn't want to be alone," he said. "She said staying there made her feel safe." "And what else did she say, Ethan?" Silence. Then, "She told me she loved me." My lungs forgot how to breathe. "She said she's always loved me. That she used to write me letters when we were teenagers and never sent them. That she came to the wedding to try and talk me out of it. That she hoped I'd change my mind." My skin went cold. "And what did you say?" I asked, barely able to get the words out. "I told her she was confused. That she was projecting." "Did you tell her to leave?" More silence. I said I needed time to think. Time to think. Time to think about what, Ethan? About whether your marriage mattered more than a woman who's been stalking you emotionally since high school. About whether your wife is more important than a cousin who wears her vulnerability like a shield and plants herself in people's lives like she owns them. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I opened a blank notebook and started writing down everything I remembered. Every red flag. Every moment I had silenced my gut for the sake of peace. Every time Ethan defended her instead of defending me. Because I knew what I had to do next. And I wasn't going to do it from a place of confusion anymore. I was going to do it from clarity. Lila hadn't just inserted herself into my honeymoon. She had been laying the groundwork for years. And Ethan? He let her. I didn't tell anyone I was going back. No warning, no announcement. Just an Uber ride in the rain and a silent elevator that groaned all the way to the 9th floor. I stood outside our apartment door for a full minute, keys in hand, listening. It was quiet. No music. No voices. No footsteps. For a brief second, I let myself believe maybe she had left. Maybe Ethan had come to his senses. Maybe I'd open the door and find a note, an apology, a sign that he still remembered who we were supposed to be. But when I unlocked the door and stepped inside, it didn't feel like home anymore. The scent of vanilla candles hit me first, Lila's favorite, not mine. There were shoes by the entrance. Not mine. Definitely not Ethan's. A pink jacket hung on the coat hook I'd used since college. And then I heard it. The hum of my hairdryer. Coming from the bedroom. I walked down the hallway like I was underwater. Heart thudding in my ears. Every step heavier than the last. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. And there she was. Lila. In my nightgown. The silk one with the lace neckline I'd worn the night we got engaged. She was standing in front of the mirror, drying her hair like she belonged there. Like this room, this space, this life were hers. She saw me in the mirror and didn't even jump. She just turned, smiled softly, and said, "Hey, I didn't think you'd be back so soon." So soon? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. I looked around the room. My jewelry box was open on the dresser. A pair of my earrings were laid out neatly beside her purse. My books had been moved. My pillow fluffed. And on Ethan's side of the bed, his wedding band was sitting on the nightstand. I backed out of the room without a word. She followed me. "You look tired," she said gently, as if she were comforting me. "This has been really hard on Ethan, you know. You leaving like that. It's not what he needed." I turned around, finally finding my voice. "I left because I was betrayed." She tilted her head. "No one betrayed you, Julia. You just couldn't handle that someone else needed him too." My blood boiled. "Don't talk to me like I'm unstable. You showed up uninvited. You hijacked our honeymoon. You invaded my home, my marriage." "I didn't force him to do anything," she said, calm as ever. "He let me in. And that was it." The moment everything collapsed. Because she was right. He let her in. She didn't pick the lock. He opened the door. I turned, grabbed the suitcase I'd left by the front door, and walked back out into the hallway. As the elevator doors closed in front of me, I saw her silhouette still standing there. No guilt. No shame. Just victory. The next morning, I met with a lawyer. I hadn't slept. I hadn't eaten. But I was clear. I showed him photos from our honeymoon. Screenshots of Lila's posts in my apartment. The list of dates when Ethan stopped answering my calls. The receipts from hotels and flight changes. He read everything in silence. Then he looked at me and said, "This isn't a marriage. This is psychological warfare." I filed for divorce the same day. No discussion. No, let's work on it. No more chances for a man who handed my life to someone else and watched her wear it like a costume. The papers were served to Ethan that weekend. He didn't call. He didn't text. But I heard from a mutual friend that he'd been devastated. Devastated that I would overreact. That I'd involve lawyers. That I wouldn't give him time to figure things out. Time? He had 2 weeks in Maui to figure things out, and he chose her. But then, something strange happened. 3 days after the papers were served, I got a knock at my hotel room door. It was the building manager from our apartment. "I thought you should know," he said. "Your cousin? The one staying in your place? She left this morning." I blinked. "She what?" "She packed up in a hurry. Said something about needing to chase clarity. Left behind a few things, but she's gone. Didn't say when she'd be back." I stood there, stunned. Gone? I rushed over to the apartment that afternoon. It smelled like her perfume still. There were coffee cups in the sink. A towel drying on the door. But no sign of Lila. No note. No goodbye. Just gone. I found my silk nightgown crumpled on the floor. My wedding ring in the kitchen drawer. And Ethan? He showed up 2 days later. Hair messy. dark circles under his eyes. He looked like someone who'd been chasing something and lost it. "Where is she?" I asked. He shrugged. "She left me a voicemail," he said. Said she was sorry for causing tension. Said she needed space to find herself. I laughed. Not a joyful laugh. A bitter, empty one. "She used you," I said. "She wanted your attention, and when she got it, it wasn't enough. Because it never is." He sat on the edge of the couch. "You were right," he whispered. "I should have never let her come. I don't know why I did. It just felt easier at the time." I stared at him. This was never about what felt easy, Ethan. This was about what was sacred. And you let her poison it. He didn't argue. He didn't ask me to stay. He just nodded. And I walked out for the last time. 6 months passed. Half a year since I last saw Ethan's face in person. Half a year since Lila vanished like smoke, leaving behind chaos and silence. I moved into a new apartment on the other side of the city. Smaller. Quieter. No shared memories in the walls. Just fresh paint and clean corners and peace. I stopped wearing my wedding ring. I stopped checking Ethan's social media. I stopped trying to figure out why he let it all happen. Some answers, I realized, only hurt more when you get them. Instead, I started building new routines. Morning walks with coffee. Friday movie nights alone, or with friends who had stood by me, unflinchingly. Therapy, once a week, where I finally said all the things I'd buried under the word nice. And slowly, I began to recognize myself again. Not the woman who tiptoed around other people's feelings. Not the wife who smiled through humiliation for the sake of harmony. But the woman who remembered that love doesn't require erasing yourself. Then, on a rainy Wednesday in April, I got a text. From a number I hadn't saved, but I knew instantly who it was. "Hey, it's Lila. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For everything. I hope someday you can forgive me." I stared at the screen for a long time. It didn't come with an explanation. No details. No accountability. Just a vague cloud of regret. For a moment, I almost responded. Almost asked where she was. Why she did it. Whether she'd ever loved him, or just loved destroying what I had. But I didn't. Because I didn't need anything from her. Not closure. Not guilt. Not friendship. I blocked the number and set the phone down. Then I lit a candle. Made tea. Opened a new book. And smiled, not because it was over, but because I had finally chosen me. Not him. Not her. Just me. And that was enough.